Morning, everyone. Welcome to the second virtual roadshow for our contract roadshow. That would be data ratification August 14th, 2024. We'll get started in just a few moments, letting everyone in from the waiting room. Let's give it a few more moments here to admit everyone from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. So stand by. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second virtual roadshow for our tentative agreement. That would be data ratification August 14th, 2024, if ratified. Today is Wednesday, July the 17th, 2024. This is our agenda for the day. First, everyone just to recognize that we all had to acknowledge the AFA Mutual Respect Policy, which is also available on the AFA Alaska website, as well as in our Constitution and bylaws. Then we'll go through some introductions of the committee, the negotiations process, the highlights of the tentative agreement, an overview of section by section, then additional resources, and a question and answer session at the end. And just to highlight for the Q&A that you submit your questions using the chat function. So there's the Q&A. Actually, sorry, not the chat, but there's a Q&A function on the lower part of your screen that says Q&A. If you click on that, you can submit questions there, and then we will be answering those at the end. All right, so first to go through our negotiating committee, my name is Jeff Peterson. I am MEC president with AFA Alaska and chair of the negotiating committee. I have been with Alaska Airlines as a flight attendant since 1999. I am San Diego based, and I have been MEC president since 2011.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Morrow. I'm a member of the negotiating committee. I am a San Diego-based flight attendant, and I have been here for 40 years.
My name is James Bozanich. I'm also a member of the negotiating committee. I'm San Diego-based, and I have been here for 15 years.
My name is Kiara Jenkins. I'm a member of the negotiating committee. I am Seattle-based, and I've been here for 13 years.
Hi, I'm Paula Mastrangelo. I'm a senior staff negotiator with AFA, and I started negotiating contracts with AFA in 1988.
Also wanted to thank our Zoom master and MEC Vice President Brian Palmer for helping us out today, and also our negotiations strategic communications representative Justin Wetherell.
Okay, I'm going to run through kind of the negotiations process that we are under the Railway Labor Act, which is the labor law that governs negotiations in the airline industry and railroad industry. So we initially exchange openers, and then we go into what's called direct negotiations. So basically, it's just the union and the company exchanging proposals and negotiating. And we oftentimes get a tentative agreement in direct negotiations. And then if we cannot reach an agreement in direct negotiations, either party can file for mediation services under the auspices of the National Mediation Board. And the National Mediation Board, or NMB, as we affectionately call them, is the organization that is the federal agency that administers the Railway Labor Act. And they will assign a mediator that will come onto the property. And as you remember, we filed for mediation in 2023, and we had a mediator assigned to us, and that individual was very helpful in helping us conclude the agreement. And in mediation, we can reach a tentative agreement, which is, almost always what happens when you're in mediation. And then if you don't, and the parties reach what's called impasse, meaning no further movement is possible, and that is decided by the mediator, then either party can request what's called a proffer of arbitration, or sometimes we refer to it as a release to strike, because either party, when they reject the proffer of arbitration, immediately you're put into a 30-day cooling off period. And sometimes that happens. The last strike in the airline industry was in 2010, and that was the Spirit pilots. So anyways, that's pretty much the process that we, by law, are bound to follow. Okay, so now we wanted to run through the negotiations timeline, and we're going to go back in history a little bit and start in December of 2014. That's when the last negotiations for a full standalone Alaska Airlines contract happened. And that was ratified in December of 2014. And under what's called Section 6 negotiations. And it's called Section 6 because it refers to Section 6 of the Railway Labor Act, which governs negotiations in our industry. In February of 2018, we ratified the Joint Collective Bargaining Agreement, which formalized the merger with Virgin America. And in May of 2021, the contract extension was ratified, and that was during COVID. The pilots had taken a one-year hiatus from negotiations, and we negotiated a one-year standalone extension that gave a pay raise and also froze insurance premiums. In January of 2022, your current negotiating committee was selected. And in April of that year, the negotiating committee had training and then conducted listening sessions in May throughout the entire system. In early summer of 2022, we sent out the negotiation survey, and then in summer prepared opening proposals based on the results of the negotiation survey, because members set the priorities for the negotiating committee. And in late summer, mobilization volunteer training happened. And then finally, after all that preparation, in September of 2022, negotiations began with management. In December of that year, the contract, the extension became amendable. And in June of this year, after all these negotiations and mediation, we reached a tentative agreement with management. So continuing this discussion, in July, we're now holding roadshows, and voting will begin on July 24th. And in August, beginning of August, so very soon, the Department of Justice will make a decision on the merger. They'll either approve the merger with conditions, so basically concessions that Alaska must make, or they will, not approve the merger. So we're all waiting to see what happens. And then on August 14th, voting closes. And that same day, the results of the tentative agreement vote will be announced. And then in August, implementation begins if the contract is ratified.
Okay. The highlights of the tentative agreement says it's a 3-year agreement. It's amendable in August of 2027. There are significant compensation increases, especially once you include boarding pay. 480 requirement is maintained. And in fact, were able to secure the fact that boarding pay counts towards insurance. A quarter of the vacation of your entitlement counts towards your vacation for the following year. There's no change to the 10.5-hour duty day. Reassignment improvements. Comprehensive improvements throughout the agreement. And this does strategically position us for whether or not the merger goes through. And don't want anyone accusing us of selling this deal, but just feel that that's our responsibility to explain what we mean by this, in that this is a very short duration, so it's only 3 years with a 1-year early opener. So if the merger doesn't go through, that we reopen in negotiations very shortly. If the merger does go through, then this gets us a second bite at the apple in a very short period of time. So this would allow us to get the improvements that are secured in this contract, in addition to being able to secure improvements through the JCBA process.
I'm going off script a little bit, but I do want to address a question that we've had from the membership and in the last roadshow also. What happens if the merger goes, if this TA is voted down, or what happens if the TA is ratified? How does that impact the merger? So I just wanted to clear some things up. So whether or not this TA passes has no impact on the Department of Justice's approval or disapproval of the merger. Our contract does not have to be closed in order for the merger to go through. And if the TA is voted down, we will immediately go back and survey the membership and find out the reasons why it was voted down. And then demand to go back to the bargaining table with management in an attempt to negotiate a second TA. Everyone asks us, will that happen? And we can't give you a definitive answer because part of that answer relies with management's decision. They can drag their feet and not negotiate with us. And then eventually our negotiations will be folded kind of into JCBA negotiations. We control whether or not the operation for flight attendants can be combined because they cannot operate a combined operation for flight attendants without the joint seniority list, and the union controls that. But as far as whether or not the JCBA negotiations can start if we do not have a ratified agreement, that has definitely happened in the past at other carriers, and could possibly happen here, but there's no guarantee. Like I said, we have no crystal ball. We can't say what would happen.
All right, so immediate pay raises would go into effect if this TA is ratified between 19% and 28%. There is a 30.2% to 72.7% pay increase over the 2 plus years of the agreement over the full 3 years. We shortened the pay scale to 14 years from 16. There is retro pay back to the amendable date of December 2022. With boarding pay, it adds on an average additional 8% to the pay rates. 3% raises to the pay scale on August the 14th, 25, so DOR plus 1 year. And again, August the 14th, 2026, DOR plus 2 years. Market rate adjustment if there is no merger. PPP is increased to $4,000 annually. And the APA will be increased upon ratification to $3, and then DOR plus 1 year, $350, DOR plus 2 years to $4. And if you do not fly on a holiday, if you're on a layover, then you get 4 TFP for holiday RON. The retro pay is paid from the amendable date, which I said was December 2022. And between December 2022 and November 2023, it's 3% on all paid TFP in the time period. Between December of 23 and April of 24, it's 6.1%. So that's 3% compounding over 1 year, 6.1% on all paid TFP in the time period. And May 2024 to August 2024, the percentage increase that's indicated at your step rate on all paid TFP in that time frame. So if you did have an anniversary increase in that time, you would get the retro pay on your rate before the anniversary increase, and then the retro pay on the new rate after your anniversary increase. All right, let's go through some examples of how the immediate pay increases would work. This is, actually, we'll go back 1 slide, sorry. Thank you very much. So just really quickly, this is the slide for all of the pay steps. We have the increase immediately between 28% for year 1, 23% year 16, the 19% year 4 and 12. So that's the bookends of the ranges. And that ranges between $7 at year 1 to $13.69 at year 16. Next slide. We're going to use an example of year 6 as how you can look at stepping through the pay scale. So many flight attendants do not understand how to review this this chart. So start with the year number 6. Today's rate is $37.94. If the TA is ratified at DOR, it will go to $48. Then during that year, you're going to have an increase at your anniversary date. So you go to year 7 at $52.50. At DOR +1, so August of next year, going to $54.08. Then to year 8, sometime during the year, to $55.88. Then DOR +2, August of the following year, $57.56. And again, you have an anniversary increase during that time. So you'll be ending up at year 9 at $59.41. The difference between $59.41 and $37.94 is $21.47. And that represents a 56.6% increase over the life of the agreement. Years 14 to 16, we have collapsed those to year 14. So the top out rate will now be year 14. That will now be at $74, which will then go to $76.22 at DOR +1, and then to $78.51 at DOR +2. That represents between an $18.20 increase to $20.31, depending on which year you're at, and that's between 30.2% to 34.9%. All right, these are the dollar and percentage increases over the life of the TA. So again, year 9, start out at the $44.16, end up at $66.04. Year 12, $21.88 is the increase at 49.5% increase over the life of the agreement. This pay chart represents how we are positioned compared to industry. The Alaska rates today would be the kind of more brownish beige at the bottom, or pretty near the bottom at pretty much almost every step as you're coming up through the scale. And then the Alaska DOR rates is the orange-brown line that puts us just between Delta and Southwest, pretty much all along the way. And that's just in the raw rates. We'll get into the boarding page in just a moment. Can we go back just one slide? I want to mention for the industry comparisons that the numbers that we used to compare to the block carriers is 1.11 TFP per block hour to convert. All right, next slide. All right, boarding pay. So boarding pay will be paid at 0.42 TFP per departure. It's paid on all the flights worked. Pre-boarding is still paid at half a TFP. There's no change there. The addition of boarding pay increases your overall pay by an average of 8%. The range, though, is from 4.7% to 33.6%, depending on the number of boardings per duty period. It will be paid above reserve guarantee and all MPRs. It's not included for bid credit, so for line build. And it applies towards the insurance 40 requirement and PPP. Sick leave accrues on all boarding TFP. And boarding TFP is not paid on deadheads or surface deadheads. So this is the calculation for boarding pay. It's 0.42 TFP at 100% pay for boarding. So this was derived more or less from the Delta calculation. Delta is the only other carrier that has boarding pay currently. Alaska is the first carrier that has secured, or the first union that has secured boarding pay in a contract. So it's a legally binding contract that cannot be changed. So at Delta, it's the prorated portion of the boarding time based on the aircraft type and destination in block hours at half of the rate. So we took that of our boarding at 45 minutes. We know that our boardings actually start at 40 minutes prior or even tighter in, but we were able to secure 45 minutes, which is a report to the aircraft, 45 minutes out of 60 minutes is 3/4 of an hour, so 0.75 hours, divided by 2 is 0.375 hours of pay. We converted that to TFP at 1.11 TFP per hour times 0.375 equals 0.42 TFP per boarding at 100% rate. Delta pays theirs at 50% of the rate. All right, here's a boarding pay example for the low end of boarding pay. So this is the highest TFP per duty period trip that we currently have out there until we add a new destination. Anchorage to JFK, the current value of the trip is 17.8, so it's just a JFK and back. The boarding pay, 2 boardings at 0.84. The new value of the trip is 18.64, and the effective boarding pay increase is 4.7%. As we are stepping up in the boarding pay effective rate, the current value of the trip for this one is 9.4. It is a Chicago 4K turn out of Portland. There are 2 boardings, 0.84 for the boardings. The new value, 10.24, and the effective boarding pay increase would be 8.9%. That's closer to the typical of 8% average. All right, a higher one. This has Milk Run. So Milk Run flying through the Southeast. This is out of Seattle. The current value of the trip is 22.4. With all those boardings, it's 5.04 TFP. The new value of the trip, 27.44. And the effective boarding pay raise would be 22.5%. All right, the highest one that we could find, and this is, there's other examples that are like this. Anytime you would have 4 boardings in a 5 TFP minimum day, you would have this number. So this is an Anchorage Fairbanks Bethel turn. The current value of the trip with MPRs is 5 TFP. With the 4 boardings, 1.68 TFP. And the new value of the trip is 6.68. Effective boarding pay raise would be 33.6%. Once you factor in boardings, this is the range of Alaska pay rates with the boardings included. At the bottom end was that 4.7% that we indicated earlier. At the top end, the 33.6%. So that is the range of that in there. And that is truly what you would be getting paid when you go to work. And as you can see, that comfortably puts us at the range of Southwest or exceeds it.
Okay, so we made some changes to the Productivity Premium Program, or PPP. The total annual payout has increased from $2,500 to $4,000 annually. There are 3 PPP blocks per year, and it can be any combination of 4 bid months. The company may change the combinations from year to year. However, the combinations must be set and announced prior to the vacation bidding the year prior. So you will know when you bid your vacation what the PPP blocks are and how much each will pay out. The payout for each PPP block, each of the 3, may vary, but combined, the total amount must equal $4,000. The minimum amount is $500. So you could have a $500, a $500, and then a $3,000 block. In order to qualify for each of the 3 blocks, you must exceed 40 TFP over the bid line award combined for over the 4 months. And it's really important to understand that boarding pay counts towards the PPP threshold qualification, because the boarding pay is not built into the lines. So any boarding pay you receive automatically goes to qualify you for the PPP. And also the state sick bank payout. Also, anytime you call in sick and use your state sick bank sick leave, that automatically also, that TFP goes to, is credited towards the 40 TFP that will qualify you for the PPP payout. For anyone on union business or company business, at least 40 TFP going towards that must come from sources other than the UB or CB. Okay, now we're going to go through the changes to the tentative agreement in section order. So I'll start with the preamble. There's a preamble in the contract. And we made some changes, as you notice, that some of them are just clarifications or bringing the language up to date. But we are going to mention any change. So we clarified agreement that it refers to the collective bargaining agreement or CBA. Just those are terms we use throughout the contract. Section 1, non-discrimination. We added the following protected categories to non-discrimination: citizenship or immigration status, gender, gender identity or gender expression, pregnancy, military or veteran status, parental status, medical or genetic information. For Section 2, purpose of the agreement, we added airlines after Alaska, so we all know what we're talking about. In Section 3, scope of the agreement, we tightened up some of the management flying requirements. Management may maintain the FAA certificate, provided that they may not attend requalification level 3 to maintain currency. So if they go completely unqualified, end of game for them. They may not perform safety-related duties as a flight attendant prior to occupying a permanent position within the in-flight department, including during any work action, and that means during a chaos situation. They may have, they may have jump seat access, but will not displace a flight attendant cleared for the jump seat. They also count towards the 2% limit on management flyers that is already in your current contract. And then we also incorporated the addendum, and you'll see throughout this discussion that we have taken the addendum, which is kind of the Q&A at the back of each section, and incorporated those provisions into the actual body of the contract, which is really where they should be. Section 4, status of the agreement. We increased the merger and transaction reimbursement fund to $2 million from the current $1 million, and also stipulated that the company will provide reasonable advance notice of proposed successorship, merger, or acquisition transaction, and the company will meet to discuss the impact of any proposed transaction upon the flight attendant group, and the company will disclose details related to such transactions to AFA in a timely manner. Oftentimes, there are restrictions on sharing such information. These are government restrictions that do not allow the company to disseminate or share some of this information, except when certain milestones have been reached. Section 5, definitions, we just updated them as needed. And Section 6, seniority, we added voluntary and involuntary furlough. Will retain and accrue occupational seniority and system seniority while on a recall list up to the maximum limit of 5 years. And with this just trues it up with Section 18. We clarified seniority, the seniority calculation tiebreaker for new hire flight attendants. That's just for flight attendants in initial training prior to them coming onto the line. It's the assignment of their seniority system. And again, we incorporated the addendum. Section 7, probationary period, we just removed the out-of-date combi language that was still in the contract.
Section 8, hours of service. 8D1, we clarified hard stand procedures. So when you report at the gate versus the plane, so obviously you can't be at the plane 45 minutes prior necessarily. You have to take the bus, so report at gate. And then release when the bus arrives at the terminal. 8D6, crew scheduling may adjust the flight attendant's to a later report time to maintain FARs while on ARON. Section 8E, we added the code FDTY, which is flight attendant on duty during duty time without an assignment. And this is for pay implications. This has been going on for a while. It's just now there's a placeholder in the contract, so you know what FDTY is all about. There's improved premium pay for 8F1. The entire TFP value of flights into or above 1230 will be paid at 2 times the rate. Currently, only the prorated portion of the flight going over 1230 gets the premium, and that will be the entire flight. 8F2, the entire TFP value of flights into or above 1230 will be paid at 3 times the rate if the duty exceeds 16 hours. And again, currently, only the prorated portion of the flight going over 1230 that exceeds 16 gets the trouble time. So this is a very nice improvement. 8G, choosing to fly over 14 hours at domicile or co-terminal will be paid at 2 times rate for the entire duty period. Currently, it's only prorated portion over 1230 for the flight going over 1230. Flying over 14 hours at outstation, paid at 1.5 times rate for the entire duty period. Currently, only the prorated portion over 1230 for the flight going over 1230 gets the premium. 8H2, paid 2 times rate for the entire sequence for waiving double out rest. Currently, it's 1.5 times. Section 8K, we had our process for restoring rest during RON to adjust the report to reassign the flight attendant or pay protect and deadhead to domicile. 8L2B, 48 and 7 hour rest that's operationally impacted will be paid 2 times the trip rate for the first duty period of the next sequence that they choose to fly. 8M1, double time pay for the first duty period if rest is between 10:30 and 10, so reduced rest. And the flight attendant flies the trip unaltered. 8M2, updated with FAA rest requirements. And 8O updated the surface deadhead times. 8Q1, we clarified and revised positive contact. This will now be an accepted crew access change notification, which has been practiced for quite some time now. A phone conversation between the flight attendant and the company on a company phone number recorded line. Conversation between on-duty flight attendant and company employee. Pilots and flight attendants are excluded, so they can't have either a flight attendant or pilot have them contact another flight attendant to provide positive contact. Or it could be a contract station personnel in some of those stations where we have the contract CSAs and such. Or if a reserve on airport standby responds on Microsoft Teams messaging. 8Q1, after the introduction of Microsoft Teams messaging for airport standby flight attendants may take a one-time Microsoft Teams CBT for 1 TFP. It's not required though. This is optional. 8Q2, block-to-block messaging. The crew scheduling may contact a flight attendant using the phone numbers on file, which is what happens today, as well as block-to-block messaging on the IMD if the flight is open on their schedule, and this will be including if you're on deadhead. A block-to-block message must be directed at an individual flight attendant or specific flight attendant. So for instance, it would say, Flight Attendant Peterson, please contact crew scheduling. Block-to-block messaging will not be considered a positive contact. So this is just a supplemental means of contact. They still would be required to contact you through the other means, such as, like, say, phone number on file. Block-to-block messaging cannot be used to junior assign. And this also outlines when block-to-block messaging may be sent or must be sent, and when the flight attendant will or will not be required to take or to make positive contact if instructed via that block message. 8Q9 clarifies the process for when a flight attendant answers or returns a call while on a layover. 8Q11, if crew scheduling interrupts a flight attendant's rest more than once, the rest must be reset to allow for 10 hours of uninterrupted rest. 8R1, clarified delay timeline and the method of contact. We also move the premium language from 8K to 8R1. That's the 2.5 times pay for the entire sequence if the departure following the layover is delayed by more than 1 hour and the flight attendant is not notified within 2 hours of block-in at the layover. In 8S3, we achieved the same evacuation opportunities afforded to pilots for natural disasters, acts of war. 8S7C clarified that sequences constructed under 8S, this provision of natural disasters, will first be offered to the original crew prior to being placed into open time. 8T, we reduced the base turn connection time to 1 hour and 30 minutes from 1 hour and 45 to provide for additional flexibility in scheduling a base turn. And like many other sections, we've incorporated the addendum and as well as settlements, LOAs, and MOUs.
Section 9 is junior available and premium open time. There has been no change to the junior available sections, but plenty of change for the premium open time to provide flight attendants a little bit more flexibility and protections, especially in SIO situations. 9E3, flight attendants may now trade premium sequences with another flight attendant's premium sequence, and both pairings will retain whichever premium rate is lower. If a flight attendant has a 1.5 times trip to Maui and another flight attendant has a double time trip to Newark, and the person who has the original Maui at 1.5 times would actually like to go to Newark, and the person who's going to Newark has family in Maui, so they'd be willing to take the Maui and reduce their premium to 1.5 times. They can do that. So both flight attendants will switch. The flight attendant who originally had the Newark for double time will now be working the Maui at 1.5 times. And the person who had the Maui at 1.5 times will now work the Newark at 1.5 times. Flight attendants will be able to trade safety positions on premium open time trips and retain the premium pay. However, all scheduled flight numbers and dates must be identical. We bumped into issues in the past where, let's say the D was unable to trade their premium open time trip with the rest of the crew to work a different position because the pairings were different. So this language allows for a little bit more flexibility. It also allows for people who might be a deadhead, but all flights are the same, to also trade their positions and still retain their premium open time. Flight attendants may SIP or JetBridge trade a portion of their premium open time sequence after it commences and retain the premium rate for flights flown. This will work out really well for commuters, for example. If you see that there is a double time Chicago in the box and you fly the leg Portland to Chicago and you live in Chicago and you find someone to take your Chicago Portland leg, you're allowed to do that. You will retain the premium for the flight that you flew from Portland to Chicago, and the other flight attendant will work the Chicago to Portland at straight time. We clarified that flight attendants will be able to trade premium open time with another premium open time trip. However, the resulting sequence on the flight attendant's line will pay at straight time. We clarified that flight attendants will be able to trade premium open time with another flight attendant. However, both pairings will pay at straight time. If crew scheduling has attempted to contact the flight attendant 2 or more hours prior to the original report, the flight attendant will only be paid the original premium rate on flown TFP and straight time on the difference between the sequences on a day-for-day basis. If crew scheduling has not attempted to contact per the above provision, the flight attendant will be paid the original premium rate on the flown TFP and on the difference between the sequences day for day. The following slides will have examples of what that means. In this situation, the flight attendant received notice of the cancellation with more than 2 hours notice. The original sequence picked up was at 1.5 times, and it was an Anchorage turn. They will be paid 8 TFP total, of which 8 TFP will be paid at straight time if they are released and given pay protection. If they are reassigned and fly less than scheduled, and the original sequence was picked up at 1.5 times, and they are reassigned to a Seattle-San Diego turn, they will be paid 8 TFP total, of which 6 TFP will be paid at 1.5 times, and 2 TFP will be paid at straight time. If they end up flying more than scheduled, and the original sequence was a San Diego turn, and they were reassigned to an Anchorage turn, they will be paid 8 TFP total, of which 6 TFP will be paid at the premium rate of 1.5 times, and 2 TFP will be paid at double time. This is how our premium open time cancellations and reassignments are currently paid. Under the new language, if a cancellation happens with less than 2 hours notice, This is speaking especially to situations where there are weather events, which we heard a lot of complaints and upset about, that people have volunteered to fly and work during extreme times and make their way in the snow to assist with operations, and to not actualize the premium time was very frustrating. So we were able to secure premium pay protection for those scenarios. In a situation where the flight attendant is pay protected and released, they are guaranteed at least the TFP value of the flight that they were supposed to fly. In this example, they picked up a Seattle-Portland turn at double time. They will be paid 4 TFP total for the DPM, which is current pay protection language, of which 2 of those TFP will actually be paid at the double time premium guarantee, and 2 TFP will be paid at straight time. Premium is only paid on flights or surface deadheads. If they end up getting reassigned and fly less than scheduled, like that the original sequence they picked up was double time Anchorage turn, and they are reassigned to a San Diego turn, they will be paid 8 TFP total, of which 6 TFP will be paid at double time, and 2 TFP will be paid at double time premium guarantee. If they end up flying more than scheduled, they originally picked up a San Diego turn for double time and are reassigned to an Anchorage turn, they will receive 8 TFP total, of which 6 TFP will be paid at double time, and 2 TFP will be paid at double time and a half for the overscheduled flying. Section 10, 10A2, we codified that there will be 4 PBS committee members. 10E1, double time and a half pay for any flights touching days off, regardless of numbers of days off in the month, with a minimum of 1.6 TFP paid at double time and a half. What that means is that if you were originally scheduled to block in at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, and for whatever reason, your flight is either delayed or there's a mechanical that ends up having your flight cross over into midnight, the actual flight has to cross over, and you block in at 12:01 or later, that entire flight will now be paid at double time and a half. And for those who are concerned about the current language that allows for 4 TFP, if you have minimum days off, we added the language to clarify that there needs to be a minimum of 1.6 TFP paid at double time and a half, so that the actualized monetary value is the same for flight attendants. 1.6 times 2.5 times equals the same dollar amount that you would receive in TFP for 4 TFP. So in no case will a flight attendant be paid less than 4 TFP monetary value for flying into their day off. 10E2, we increased minimum days to 13 days off in a 31-day bid month for line holders. We codified 6 TFP bid credit for recurrent training day 2. We clarified the process for flight attendants not meeting government requirements for stations in foreign countries. An example of this would be COVID vaccinations. So we now have a process for flight attendants who don't meet those foreign country regulations. We added the ability to waive 48 and 7 rest to 26 and 7 rest at RONs during the bidding process. We were also able to codify the ability to waive 48 and 7 rest to 47 rest at domicile during bidding. We clarified that if buddy bidding is not awarded, then line preferences are awarded at the lower seniority. In 10Q6, we incorporated the low bid option LOA and clarified the sick leave makeup application. 10R reassignments. Crew scheduling may combine multiple trips with RON at domicile for the purposes of reassignment. However, they must provide a hotel and transportation upon request. Crew scheduling may call to offer reassignments with an earlier report time. However, the flight attendant is not required to accept. There were situations in which there were reassignments available at an earlier time. For instance, someone may have had a Seattle-Austin 4K turn and a Dallas 4K turn reported 30 minutes earlier, and they would have accepted that reassignment, but they were unable to because the reassignment was earlier. So now flight attendants do have the option, but are not required to accept earlier reassignments. We codified the practice that sequences constructed under 8S will first be offered to original crew prior to being placed in open time. And it is in this section because that language is still true even if the 8S is not happening the night prior, but is happening the day of. We increased reassignment pay, and in the next slide, we have a few examples. It is 1.5 times pay for the entire sequence, greater of actual or scheduled flying on a day-for-day basis during the reassignment for line holders. Any change to a scheduled layover city will be considered a reassignment. In this example, the original pairing was a 2-day Fort Lauderdale, and they were reassigned to a 2-day YVR. Currently, how this particular pairing would be paid is that 1 TFP would be paid at straight time for flights flown, 3 TFP would be paid at straight time for the duty period minimum, and 3.2 TFP would be paid at straight time for pay protection to bring the total value of the day up to 7.2 TFP. On day 2, the flight attendant would receive 7.7 TFP at straight time for the flights that they flew on day 2. Under this new language, they would receive on day 1, 1 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown, and 3 TFP at 1.5 times for the DPM. On day 2, they would receive 7.7 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown. And then at the end of the sequence, they would be credited for any flights not made up in the original sequence, and that is 2.7 TFP at 1.5 times for the premium guarantee, totaling 14.4 TFP at 1.5 times. In this next example, the original pairing was a Maui, and they actually flew a Fort Lauderdale worth 14.4. Currently, the flight attendant would be paid 7 TFP at straight time for flights flown and 0.2 TFP at 1.5 times for flying over scheduled. On day 2, they would receive 7 TFP at straight time for flights flown and 0.2 TFP at 1.5 times for flying over scheduled. The new pay would be 7.2 TFP at 1.5 times for flight flown, and on day 2, 7.2 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown. There are exclusions to reassignment premium. These must occur in the same duty period of the original sequence. Overflies, landings not completed, but landings occurs in one of the next scheduled stations of a duty period. An example would be if a flight attendant was doing southeast flying and they had to overfly Petersburg and land in Wrangell and continue north. That would not be considered a reassignment. Return to gate, flights converted to ferry flights. If you land in OKC and there is a mechanical that requires that you are not able to take all of the passengers back from OKC to Seattle, however, you've been cleared to fly at a lower altitude and ferry the flight back, those flights converted to ferry flights will not be considered reassignment. Delays, removing flights from a trip. For example, if you were originally scheduled to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles to Portland, and the San Francisco to Los Angeles leg is removed and you fly directly from San Francisco to Portland, that is not considered a reassignment. Flight numbers or trip number changes, but the city pairs remain the same. An example would be if we had a Portland to Indianapolis route, and it originally in the big packet is flight 174, but the Indy race is happening and the company would like to renumber that specific flight to 501 in celebration for it, or 500 in celebration of it, that would not be considered a reassignment. Conversions to deadhead or from deadhead to working are not reassignments. Those are handled through 10X below, which we will get to. Earlier retimes of 29 minutes or less that occur after the commencement of a pairing and are accepted by a flight attendant. And 8S pairings, as they will be paid through the 8S provisions. Exceptions for reassignment premium that will not pay on the entire sequence, but will pay on the effective duty period at a rate of 1.5 times include diversions, tech stops, and flag stops, go arounds, which is taking off and returning to the same airport, and earlier retimes that are greater than 29 minutes occurring on the first day of the sequence and accepted by the flight attendant prior to scheduled report. 10R, you will also receive double times pay if 4+ legs or more. If you work 4+ legs or more than the original sequence on a day-for-day comparison, if you were originally supposed to work 1 leg to Spokane, have a long layover, and work 1 leg back, and instead you were reassigned to the milk run, you will get paid double time for the entire sequence. We clarified that flight attendants may trade reassignments, however, pay protections and pay premiums will not apply. Crew scheduling may provide pay protections for pre-cancellations through crew access notifications. Flight attendants may submit and have a standing preference form to waive pay protection for all pre-cancels. So flight attendants will now be able to submit a form and say, hey, if I am in a situation where there's a pre-cancel on my line, I would prefer to just waive pay. Please release me and I will enjoy the day off. Flight attendants may not waive pay for minimal schedule changes, and the following below must all these requirements must be met. All RONs must remain the same, and no individual RON can be reduced by more than 4 hours, and the total number of legs in the sequence must be the same or fewer, and there must be no additional surface deadheads added to the sequence. And for turns, the city pairs must remain the same. We codified flight attendants who accept alternate assignments will be paid for the actual or scheduled flying, whichever is greater, on a day-for-day basis. Flight attendants whose passport is out for renewal may be released from international flying without pay or utilize the pre-cancellation language for an alternative assignment. We incorporated the retime LOA. Flight times of original departures between 1 minute and 29 minutes are not pre-cancel. Flight attendant is not required to report early. Earlier flight retimes of original departures, 30 minutes or greater, are a pre-cancel. If the flight attendant chooses to fly the pairing, they'll be paid 1.5 times for the first flight. Flight retimes with an arrival of the last flight of the sequence by more than 30 minutes are pre-cancel. If the flight attendant chooses to fly the pairing, they will be paid 1.5 times for the last flight. Retimes may not cross midnight into a day off. All retimes that reduce the RON by at least 4 hours are pre-cancel. We updated pre-cancellation language so that there is no additional call required if the first contact regarding pre-cancellation occurs between 6 and 8 p.m. So 1 call between 6 and 8 will suffice. There is no need for a flight attendant to call back again between that time frame. There is no additional call required if the flight attendant chooses to self-assign an alternative assignment prior to 6 p.m. We are introducing pre-cancellation self-assignment. This is the ability to self-assign an alternative assignment from open time without having to call or discuss anything with crew scheduling. This provision is in addition to other pre-cancellation provisions. You may exceed the original footprint by 2 hours earlier or 2 hours later. They may be you can use the pre-cancellation self-assignment to choose an out-of-domicile sequence, and it will count towards the out-of-domicile maximum. The pre-cancellation footprint may not cross midnight into a day off. There will be no premium or pay protection that applies if a flight attendant trades out of the like sequence or alternative assignment. CS crew scheduling will now annotate a trip with the CBA provision under which modifications occur. We incorporated the screenshot LOA or the screenshot labor memo in regards to incorrect TFP displaying on JCTE. All deadheads are required non-bumpable seats unless unavailable at the time of booking. Deadheads returning to domicile at the end of the sequence must be on the next available AAG departure. Deadheads longer than 4 hours will be guaranteed a seat in cabin. They can volunteer to get a revenue passenger on, but they cannot be forced into the jump seat. They will be paid 1.5 times for the deadhead segment to sit in the jump seat. Deadheads that are less than 4 hours, a flight attendant may be required to sit in the jump seat to get revenue passengers on. They will be paid 1.5 times for the deadhead segment. It will be offered in seniority order and assigned in reverse seniority order. Deadhead seating assigned will be as follows, and this will be based on the availability at the time that the deadhead seat is booked. First, non-premium aisle window seat forward of the wing, then most forward non-premium aisle window seat in the main cabin, then most forward non-premium seat in main cabin, and also flight attendants will be able to request for deadhead seat upgrades to first class aisle window exit row or premium aisle window if it's available within the priority during boarding. All deadheads converted to working will now be paid at 1.5 times the pay rate, regardless of whether or not they are scheduled as such in the bid packet. Senior flight attendants deadheading may choose the conversion and receive premium. Otherwise, the conversions will be assigned in reverse seniority order. Reserve deadhead conversions will be credited at 1 times towards the guarantee and paid 0.5 times above the guarantee. Internet will not be provided free of charge on the IMD whenever deadheading. Deadhead flight attendants may pre-order food when available. Deadhead flight attendants can receive $5 in lieu of the complimentary meal when food is available on QX or SkyWest flights. 10Z, personal drop timeline has been extended to 2 p.m. from 12 p.m. Personal drops do not count as a split for reserves. Reserves may preference to opt out of a personal drop after the start of a reserve availability period. 10DD2, which is the 4K language, we increase the scheduled sit time during a 4K turn to 75 minutes. This will allow the company to build a few more 4K pairings, such as Cabo turns, in which the ground time is required in order to conduct security sweeps in order to make the turn legal. We incorporated the addendum of Section 10 as well. Section 11, reserve. We clarified that the reserve availability period for AMs ends at 1:59:59 p.m., that PM ends at 11:59:59 p.m., and ER is from midnight to 11:59:59 p.m. All accepted crew scheduling ER conversions will be paid at double time the rate for all TFP flown or credited or airport standby during that converted duty period. One TFP will be paid at double time the rate above guarantee if the reserve is converted to ER and not used. And all ER conversions are treated the same. That is, there is no longer divided into voluntary or involuntary, and the conversion cap has been removed. If a flight attendant is assigned an airport standby past the last flight of the day on the last day of the block, they will be paid double time the rate for airport standby. Currently, we have a provision that says that if the last flight of the day has left the domicile, that a flight attendant can call and request to be released. So if a flight attendant is requested to remain on duty after that last flight has departed, they will receive double time the rate for the airport standby period. If a reserve is not given 3 hours notice prior to report, they may receive reimbursement for parking close to the terminal or round trip rideshare or taxi expenses. We removed the ACARs and clarified methods of contact. Reserves who self-assign for the first day of a block may request to be released from contactability until their report time. This is similar to what some other carriers do, which is called release to report. So flight attendants can now request an approval for the request and the approval will occur the day prior. It'll be processed in seniority order in the same availability period and same number of available days. So 1-day PMs, 2-day AMs, 3-day ERs will all be in separate buckets. If you receive approval, the reserve may not trade the assignment. If approved, the reserve is not required to be contactable until their report time. However, the reserve is responsible for later report times as a result of delays or cancellations. 11E1B, AM, PM, and now ER reserves with 4 days or more can self-assign airport standby. Reserves may self-assign a trip that breaks the monthly guarantee if it's approved by crew scheduling. Reserves may be removed from a sequence due to aircraft downgrade or a line holder calling in well for a sequence for sequences that they have self-assigned. The flight preference will no longer include airport standby assignments. We clarified that airport standbys must be assigned in the order of the reserve assignment list within the same days of availability and call type. If the airport standby duty exceeds 10.5 hours, the reserve will be paid 1.5 times on the rate for flights flown in a duty period. For airport standbys who receive 4K assignments on airport standby, they will receive 1.5 times the rate for flights flown in a duty period if their duty day exceeds 12 hours and 30 minutes. ER reserves will be paid double time the rate for airport standby. An electronic list of reserves currently on airport standby will be made available. Reserves not used on a holiday is paid holiday premium on the reserve guarantee for the day not used. Currently, there is no additional compensation. All 4K flying will now be paid at 1.5 times the rate, including self-assign. Reserve premium of $2.50 will now be paid on airport standby. Boarding pay will pay above the guarantee. We incorporated the side letter of agreement that states that line holders can split blocks of picked up reserve days. The load time first assigned has been updated to the reserve assignment list. We incorporated the addendums and the LOAs. Section 12, exchange of sequences. We incorporated the existing trade lines. JetBridge trades are now allowed to start as early as midnight on the calendar day of departure of the flight being traded. If the departure happens to be between midnight and 2:59 a.m., the flight attendant will be able to trade within 3 hours of departure. So if the flight is departing at midnight 01, they'll be able to call and do the trade at 9:01 p.m. the day prior. We updated the threshold sequence number, TSN, so that each domicile increases by at least 2. 350 active flight attendants equals 4 daily sequences. Each additional 200 active flight attendants and portion thereof equals 1 additional daily sequence. 1 additional daily sequence is allotted to a domicile with co-terminals. We removed the references to the open time trial. Flight attendants are now able to pick up 2 out of domicile sequences per bid month from each domicile. Each flight attendant will effectively be able to pick up 10 out of domicile sequences. Out of domicile pickups include reserve blocks. You must have a calendar day free of duty prior to and after the block. However, you may combine multiple contiguous blocks. This would count as the same out of domicile pickup. Out of domicile pickup or trades that are subsequently pay protected or dropped in their entirety do not count towards the monthly pickup limit. We updated the section with the FAA required rest. We incorporated the addendum, and we have requested a more robust trip view, which will include block, TFP per leg, sit time, deadhead block time, etc. Section 13, uniforms. We added dresses and the packable parka to basic uniforms. We clarified that the company will pay for shipping on all orders and returns, as well as taxes for orders made with the uniform allotment. We increased the Arctic boot reimbursement by $50 from $200 to $250. We clarified that the new uniform rollout process and allotment will be $892. It is currently $700. We clarified the uniform return exchange program and included the maternity pieces. This brings us in alignment with most other work groups on property. We clarified the process during inventory challenges, examples like COVID, and we incorporated the addendum in this section.
Section 14, vacations. We reinstated the 6th week of vacation at 25 years of service. A little history on that is we used to have the 6 weeks and we lost it in 1994 with the Southwest Agreement. So here we are 30 years later and we got it back. A quarter earned vacation applies toward vacation for $480 for the following year. Vacation payout is now allowed during a leave of absence. Section 15, leaves of absence. We expanded the leaves related to serious incidents. In regards to the death on board, we removed the flight attendant provided the first aid, and now the entire crew will be pay protected for the rest of the trip and offered pay protection in the next 7 days. We also added AED. The company must disclose options of being removed from sequence. Improved bereavement leave of absence. We added miscarriage and stillbirth, extended timeline to 90 days. We eliminated forced maternity leave timeline. We found that our contract was in conflict with federal law. It's illegal to put a timeline. Updated minimum maximum coordination to an inclusive TFP range. And that is no fewer than 3/10 of a trip per day, 9 TFP in a 30-day month, 9 3/10 TFP in the 31-day month. And you can use up to and including 120 TFP a month from sick leave until it's depleted. Incorporated addendum, grievance, and LOA.
Okay, we have a 12-minute video to explain sick leave, OJI specifically to the sick leave, the two banks, the state sick bank and the CBA sick bank, and how those interact with Section 32.
The following video will explain Section 16, sick leave, on-the-job injury and retirement, and Section 32, attendance policy. The video is about 12 minutes long. You may pause the video to take screenshots or look for the corresponding infographics on the AFA Alaska social media pages or at contract2022.afaalaska.org/TA. Before I get into the details, there are two very important facts. Your total sick leave accrual remains unchanged, and even though there are two sick leave banks, your access to either of them is unrestricted. You may use either bank at any time. Which bank you use is a strategic decision to avoid attendance points. In this video, you will find answers to which changes are necessitated by Washington and Oregon paid sick leave laws, how our tentative agreement exceeds those state laws, and how the state bank allows for more flexibility. Despite management's preference of applying sick leave laws on a state-by-state basis, Section 16 has been negotiated to incorporate the most beneficial state sick leave provisions across the board. The state of Alaska currently has no sick leave protections, and the state of California has an exemption for employees covered by a collective bargaining agreement. Our negotiating committee bargained to ensure our flight attendants will have more flexibility than legally required, while also placing restrictions upon management for things like the verification periods, which I will discuss later on. The total sick leave accrual rate is the same as our current industry-leading rate. Just like today, for every 10 TFP worked or credited, including vacation, but excluding sick leave and stranded pay, you will accrue a total of 1 TFP. With the tentative agreement, that 1 TFP will be split into thirds. 2/3 will go into your CBA bank, and 1/3 will go into your state bank. For example, if you are credited for 75 TFP in 1 month, you would accrue 7.5 TFP of sick leave. 5 TFP will go into your CBA bank, and 2.5 TFP will go into your state bank. Let's look at the way the CBA bank accrues on its own and its uses. Your CBA bank use will be the same as your current sick bank. Under the tentative agreement, 2/3 of your monthly accrual based on worked and credited TFP will go into your CBA bank. Sick family will still be deducted from the CBA bank with no points assessed, provided you have sufficient TFP in your CBA bank to cover the sick family call on a day-by-day basis. The following will not change from the current sick leave and attendance policy provisions. Industry-leading accrual rate between the two sick banks, up to 6 banked points under the attendance policy, quarterly and yearly record improvements, the same attendance point values, an 18-month point roll-off, the termination threshold point amount at 12 points, and the single continuous occurrence of illness of up to 10 days. The following provisions will change. The maximum sick bank accrual has been increased, and in addition, you will have 3-point reduction form submissions annually. The 3-point reduction forms will be in addition to the state bank's protections. The state bank will be discussed in detail shortly, but as a preview, the state bank has no attendance points. You can use it strategically multiple times throughout the year to save your point reduction forms, and you can use it when you need time off for qualifying events other than illness. The maximum CBA bank accrual has been increased from 1,700 TFP to 2,400 TFP, and the retirement payout has changed to 25%, 50%, or 100% of your bank balance based on the amount in your bank at the time of retirement. In summary, your CBA bank will function the same as your current sick bank does, but with a 2/3 accrual rate, the same protected absences such as intermittent family leaves of absence and sick family, the same attendance point values, an increase in the maximum accrual, and improved payout upon retirement. With the addition of boarding pay, you will have an increased accrual rate. When using the CBA bank, you will not need to verify the reason for your sick leave, and sick family remains the same as the current agreement. Now let's break down the state sick bank accrual and use. Going forward, 1/3 of your monthly sick leave accrual in TFP will be deposited into your state or protected bank. Upon contract implementation, 40 TFP from your existing sick bank will automatically be rolled into your state bank for immediate use. The state bank has expanded allowed reasons for use beyond illness. This includes preventative care, domestic violence, harassment, sexual assault or stalking, bereavement, funeral or making necessary arrangements, public health emergencies such as school or child care closure, evacuation at domicile, and unsafe air quality or heat index at your place of work. Importantly, no attendance points will accrue when using the state sick bank. The legal requirements of the protected or state bank are: there are no attendance points when using the state bank. Probationary flight attendants can use their state bank after 90 days and they will not receive an occurrence. Using your state bank does not impact yearly or quarterly record improvement, and state bank sick leave TFP counts towards achieving the productivity premium program payout. There is no state bank accrual limit during the year. At the end of the year, you may have a maximum rollover of 40 TFP to next year's state bank. You can transfer the balance in excess of 40 TFP to your CBA bank, or you can choose to pay it out at 100% rate. During a verification period, the company must reimburse you for any out-of-pocket medical costs when using your state bank. State law allows the company to require verification for use of state bank sick leave throughout the entire year for any absences over 3 consecutive workdays. Our negotiating committee negotiated a reduction to the company's legal allowance. Verification was reduced to 3 10-day periods per year, with a requirement for the company to notify flight attendants at least 2 days prior to the start of each period. If we are not in a verification period, or the verification requirements are not met, no further action is required for your sick call to be protected, and no attendance points will be assessed. If we are in a verification period, and verification requirements are met, you must provide a note from a healthcare provider, or other substantiating evidence within 10 days of the initial call. Keep in mind the company must reimburse you for any out-of-pocket medical costs associated with a verification period when using your state bank. The verification requirements are that the company has given notification at least 2 days prior to the verification period's start, and that your absence is more than 3 consecutive workdays. Verification periods will be the same dates for everyone in all domiciles. The verification periods will be a maximum of 10 days and are limited to 3 periods per year. You will only need to provide verification if your absence during these periods are 4 consecutive workdays or more. You will have no verification required if the first sick call of a single continuous occurrence occurs prior to the company's 2-day advance notice, if you use your state bank for 3 or fewer consecutive workdays, or if you use the state bank outside of a verification period. Use of the CBA bank will never require verification. If there's not enough TFP in your state bank to cover your entire sequence, and you designated the state bank to be used, it will automatically switch to your CBA bank when your state bank cannot cover another full day of the sequence. You are then able to use your point reduction form or banked points if available. In summary, on implementation, 40 TFP from your existing sick bank will automatically be rolled into your state bank for immediate use. The state bank will accrue 1/3 of your monthly TFP. There is no maximum annual accrual amount. At the end of the year, you may roll over anything in excess of 40 TFP to your CBA bank, leaving 40 TFP in your state bank for the following year, or cash it out at a rate of 100%. This bank's improved and gained provisions include protected sick leave with no points, additional sick leave application situations, and improvements above the minimum legal requirements. Now that we've covered the differences between the banks, which bank might you use in various situations? I'm not feeling well and I haven't used my point reduction form. Using your CBA bank allows you to call in sick, then you could use your point reduction form to remove your points for up to 10 days, just as you would currently. As an alternative, you could use your bank points if available. I'm not feeling well and have already used my point reduction form. Your state bank does not accrue attendance points. As long as the occurrence is not during one of the 3 allowable verification periods per year, an option you might consider is to use your state bank. No further action is required. The company must reimburse you for any out-of-pocket medical costs associated with a verification period when using your state bank. I have a doctor's appointment that I cannot reschedule, and no one is picking up my trip that's posted for grab. Preventative care, such as a doctor's appointment, is covered by the state bank. When you call crew scheduling, you might tell them you're using your state bank to call in sick so that you don't accrue any attendance points. As long as the absence is not during a verification period, no further steps are necessary. If the absence is during a verification period, but is 3 consecutive days or less, no further steps are necessary. There's a wildfire near my home. I have to evacuate and it's a verification period. Now what? Using the state bank during verification periods means if you are out for more than 3 consecutive workdays, you need to provide evidence of the reason for the protected sick leave. If your leave is under 4 days, no verification is necessary. I called in sick for my 2-day yesterday. I designated my state bank for the absence, but I'm still not feeling well and I have another trip coming up. I don't want to exhaust my state bank. What should I do? By default, a sick call will be designated to the CBA bank unless otherwise indicated when calling crew scheduling. If you've called in and designated either bank, but later decide you would rather have used the opposite bank, you can call crew scheduling prior to the end of your next sequence and switch banks. You may then use your point reduction form or banked points, if available, if you're switching to the CBA bank, or your leave will then be protected if switching to the state bank. To review, your CBA bank use will be as follows. Call crew scheduling, designate your CBA bank for your sick call. There is no verification required. You can then utilize your point reduction form or banked points if applicable. For the state bank use, you will call crew scheduling and designate your state bank for the call. Then provide substantiating evidence only if the absence is during one of the 3 allowable verification periods and the leave is 4 or more consecutive workdays. Thank you for watching, and please be sure to attend a roadshow for answers to your questions. The roadshow schedule can be found at contract2022.afaalaska.org/TA.
Section 17, medical examinations, clarified and incorporated current practice for medical examination disputes and pay protection. Section 18, reduction in force, we incorporated an addendum and reduction in force 2020 LOA, clarified practice and reorganized section. Section 19, grievance procedures, incorporated addendum, maintain current provisions. And Section 20, Board of Adjustment, maintain current provisions. Section 22, expenses. Per diem increases to $275 on 8/14/24, date of ratification, $280 on 8/14/25, and $285 on 8/14/26. Reimbursement for passport photos and reimbursement for passport expedited fees.
We did make some changes to insurance benefits, and we thought it was really important for flight attendants to understand exactly what cost share, health insurance premium cost share is, and how a percentage increase in your insurance premium cost share is much different than a percentage increase in your rate of pay. So an important thing to understand also is that boarding pay TFP counts towards the 480 for insurance eligibility. And we have also secured a benefit, a $5,000 repayment benefit for adoption expenses. And the insurance premiums today are frozen at the 2019 rates. And that will be the rate for all of 2024. That equates currently to about 15.9% of the entire insurance premium. In 2019, the actual flight attendant cost share was 20%. We thought it would be too harsh to jump right back to 20%. So we are gradually stepping into, excuse me, the increase back to 20%. So the increase will be from 15.9% to 18% in 2025. In 2026 and 2027, the flight attendant cost share for insurance premiums will increase to 20% and remain at that level. Also, it's important to understand that in conjunction with the increases to cost share, there's a protection in the contract that remains, and that is that your insurance premiums cannot increase more than 15% from one year to the next, and that's the actual dollar amount. So as we said, in 2019, the flight attendant cost share was 20%. The company wanted 20% again, but we said, no, that would be too abrupt. We had to actually gradually step into that over 3 years. In the 2020 extension, we froze the actual dollar amount of your premium. So your actual premiums that you paid could not increase by even $1. So as insurance premiums increase, the percentage of their cost share decreased. So today, flight attendants pay approximately 16% of the total premium cost. So we want to talk about what the increases in the contract, in the tentative agreement mean, and what they mean in dollar amounts for flight attendants, and also address the protections that are built into the contract. So we can go to the next slide. So it's important to understand what cost share means. Today, for the different tiers of coverage, so employee only, employee plus spouse, employee plus children, and family coverage, there is a total global premium associated with that. And You can see for employee only, it's $1,043 a month, all the way up to family, which is $2,776 a month. And the flight attendant portion today would equates to about 16% of that premium. For employee only, it's 166, and for family, it's 448. And that means the company pays the rest of that premium. So for the 166 that flight attendants pay today for employee only, the company pays $877 a month for a total of $10,524 a month. So you can understand that's why they care a lot about how much a flight attendant pays, because the company pays the bulk of the insurance, as it should be. And that's why we fought really hard to maintain the protections and the low premiums that flight attendants pay. So let's look at the scenario for 2025. Right now, the premiums have not been set for 2025. They'll be set just before open enrollment later on in the year. Alaska Airlines is a self-insured carrier, as most airlines are. And that means that the premiums are set by a third-party administrator. And there are specific guidelines, so they can't set any premium. The premiums are based on the experience or the cost that the company paid out over the prior year. And also with some assumptions about the increases that will happen in the following year in healthcare. The company wants the premiums as low as possible because they pay the bulk of the premiums. So we are going to kind of create our own scenario, and we can go to the following page. And it's a very conservative scenario, which means, you know, we're being very, we're picking a high percentage increase. So you'll see that even if the insurance premiums increase significantly, you are still protected. So we're going to assume a 10% increase in healthcare premiums. That's really high. It's been trending like 4 to 6% over the last several years. So we're going to look at, in that first column there, hypothetically, let's say insurance premiums increase by 10%. That's what those global premiums, monthly premiums would be. And the flight attendant portion, if we say it's 18% of the total premium, no, I'm sorry, I apologize. These are what the flight attendants paid, what you guys pay today in insurance premiums at the different tiers. And there are two things that work together. You flight attendants will pay the lower of 15% over what they paid in the year prior, or the cost share percentage, which for 2025 is 18%. So if we look at 15% over what flight attendants pay today, that's that yellow shaded column. So from 166 to 191 per month. That's the maximum that you would be charged for healthcare. And if we look at the column, the 18% of the total premium, those numbers are all higher. So you would receive the protection in this scenario of the 15% over the 2024 cost share payment that you pay today. And we'll go to the next slide. That would mean that if we look at what the 15% max cost share would be, and again, this would hold regardless of what the premium increase is for next year, you would never pay more than these numbers right here. So the 15% maximum increase over the 2024 cost is 191. If we subtract from that for employee only, what the flight attendant paid in 2024, which is 166, the monthly premium, that would mean a monthly increase of $25. To put that in perspective, that's maybe one boarding pay or 2 boarding pays, depending on what your pay rate is. So we've kept insurance increases very low and put a lot of other pay increases into the agreement to subsidize those.
You're muted there, Sandra.
I am so sorry, I was muted. I
No,
will
it works.
cover Section 24, general and miscellaneous, clarified current practice on jury duty. Section 25, air safety, health, and security, pay protection for flight attendants remaining with injured, ill crew members. And we added language on pandemic provisions. Section 26, association security, brought into compliance with AFA Constitution and bylaws.
All right, I'm going to take us through the end of the sections here until we get to the LOA. So the first one is going to be Section 27, which is General Association. As Paula mentioned earlier in this, some of the kind of cleanup things that we did was either incorporate the addendums or kind of strike archaic language that results are from things such as, manual paper revisions and things like that just aren't relevant anymore because we use electronic format for that. So the first thing you're going to notice here is side letters may be distributed electronically. The original provision required paper copies of this to be distributed. So electronic is how we do it now. We've increased the initial training AFA orientation from 1 hour to 2 hours in this contract. We clarified applications for CB pay for company meetings. So company meetings will be paid either at a minimum of 4 TFP or hour for hour at 0.75 TFP, whatever is greater. There is an exception though, conference or video calls that are scheduled for and are actually 30 minutes or less, so will only be paid 2 TFP. As it current stands, UB and CB override is 5%, which accounts for per diem because per diem is not paid on CB like it does for flying. However, due to the boarding pay, which is considered income, we've taken the average of the boarding pay and also added that to the UB CB override to account for boarding pay. So that's an additional 8%. Flight attendants attending company meetings, they will be paid the most direct route at time of travel, which includes surface deadhead. Flight schedules change throughout the year. And as the way that the current language was, there really was no indication of what that actual flight was. So for example, throughout the year, currently in San Diego, there is a direct flight to Anchorage, but that's only during the summertime, and that's new as of now. That would be considered the most direct travel at time of travel if you actually were flying on a day that that flight operated. If you did not fly on a day that that flight operated, you'd be paid the most direct route otherwise to get to the destination. So it's kind of a clarification on that. Another addition that we made here was flight attendants facilitating company-sponsored trainings will make no less TFP than flight attendants attending that training. An example of this would be Beyond Service or the Care Retreat. Flight attendants that attend this training get a specific amount of TFP that is negotiated at times for that. Whereas CB applications are at 0.75 TFP per hour with a minimum of 4. So what this provision allows for is basically pay parity so that someone who is facilitating this actual training would receive no less TFP than an individual attending that training as long as they're for the same number of hours. We are going to move on to domiciles now, which is Section 28. There is not a whole lot of changes to this. We maintain the co-terminal provisions. Again, removing some archaic language here with the requirement to have paper manual revisions at co-terminals. It's no longer applicable because we have an electronic version of the IND. We did strike all of the commuter language and we moved that to a separate commuter policy, which I'll explain at the end, and we incorporated the addendum. Moving on to Section 29, which is performance-based pay. We'd retitled this section. It used to be profit sharing and retirement. Now it's performance-based pay because that is how our main bonus is paid. It's the performance-based pay program. One significant enhancement that we had here was increase to our 401k match. We currently actually have the highest 401k match in the industry, but we put some additions to this. So currently it's a 7.5% dollar for dollar match. If you contribute 7.5, the company will contribute up to a max of 7.5. If you contribute 10 of your own dollars, 10%, the company will match that at 7.5 cap. At DOR, that is increasing to 8%, which is a 0.5% increase. And at DOR plus 2, we're adding another 0.5% increase to the company match for a total of 1% in this agreement. We also secured an end of the year true up. I'll explain what that is. Other groups on property have this. Basically, what this ensures is that you will never receive less than what you were entitled to for a company match. So you are currently allowed to go into your 401k and you can select whatever contribution that you want to have as base of a percentage of the money of eligible income that you have to contribute to your 401k. So you can go into your 401k program and you can say, I want 10% of my eligible income to be diverted to my 401k. I can do 20%, 15%, 30%, whatnot. So you have flexibility in doing that. However, there are IRS limits that specify exactly how much of your income can you put per year in your 401k. And if you were to maximize your 401k and you stopped contributing money into it, as the current provision is now, the company will stop matching your eligible income because you are no longer contributing to it. So this actually penalizes people who front load their 401k or try to contribute as much as they can at the beginning of the year and then not do it the remaining of the year. So what this provision ensures is even if you stop contributing because you've maxed it out, the company will still contribute what they would have contributed had you continued to contribute the entire year, and they will do it as a one-time true-up at the end of the year to make you whole, basically, is what that is. We also moved the retiree path travel to a separate provision in the jump seat and pass provision section, which I'll go over towards the end.
Hey, I just want to jump in real quick. I might have misheard you, but I just want to clarify on the 401k that we have one of the highest matches in the industry, and you may have said that. I apologize if I'm just repeating.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. We have the second highest currently.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. All right. So Section 30, training. Flight attendants, you used to not be allowed to use your sick bank if you had to call in sick for recurrent training. However, now the sick bank pool will allow for you to use that. So you can use your state sick bank to qualify or to basically pay out for calling in sick for recurrent. We clarified voluntary in-person training applications. There used to be a training in the past called Making the Connection, where you as a flight attendant could shadow a gate agent or a CSA and, kind of learn their role because you directly work with one another during that boarding period and deplaning. So we basically added a provision in there that if the company does offer training like this, it specifies pay application, travel pay, just all of that stuff. So we added that into here. Flight attendants without training in their base. So if you are a San Diego-based flight attendant, for example, you are able to bid for recurrent in a base, in any base, because you do not have training in your base. A lot of people go to Anchorage because Anchorage is a wonderful place to go to. However, during the summertime, there is a fairly large hotel constraint challenges where it's very hard to secure a hotel room because of the cruise traffic and everybody else that goes there for the summertime to do various activities. So during the months of May through August, you as a flight attendant who does not have training, recurrent training in your base, you are not able to bid for recurrent training in Anchorage. That does not mean that you're not allowed to attend recurrent training in Anchorage. You're just not allowed to bid for it. You may trade into recurrent training during these months. However, the company will not provide you a hotel room due to the hotel capacity constraints there. We also removed the ability for reserve to bid for recurrent training on a scheduled day off. This is actually a remnant from line bidding back in the day, because you would bid for recurrent training and then you would line bid, and that would result in you potentially having recurrent training because it happens first on a day off. But because we do PBS bidding now, it's irrelevant. So that provision is just moved in its entirety. Another enhancement that we put into this, for those attending any company training in domicile, if you live more than 50 straight line miles away from the training facility. So an example of this would be if you are an LAX-based flight attendant, but you live in Bakersfield and you need to go to recurrent training in Long Beach, that is more than 50 straight line miles to the training facility. You would be eligible for a hotel room that you can book on your own and reimburse up to $200. This applies to people flying in who might live in Denver but are LA based, things like that. For attending and training in your domicile, if you live within that, past that 50 line mile specification, then you can reimburse a hotel up to $200. For those that fly in specifically, because when you get to an airport, you have to also transport yourself to a hotel or a training facility. You're able to expense $30 in rideshare or transportation to attend training per day. Flight attendants training, attendants voluntary train out of domicile. We clarified you can bid for recurrent training in another base that you'll be on your own for accommodations, stuff like that if you have training in your base. However, we specified or clarified that you can request positive space travel in order to attend that training out of domicile. Provisions were also added to the home study CBT so that the company in the future could include the actual exam in the home study or instructional videos. The exam is currently done in recurrent training as well as videos for door drills, things like that. So we've opened up the opportunity that they want to add that, then they can do that. The language in the contract or the TA does specify, if it applies to the time trial and things like that and how long the actual CBT can be for recurrent. We also clarified pay protections if you're disqualified or dequalified for not completing recurrent or requalification training. So, for example, if you do not pass one of the drills and you have to go into a third attempt and you dequal, it basically specifies that you will not be pay protected until you become requalified again if you have to miss any trips because of that. The home study was increased from $75 to $115 in this TA. We also have added in a pay component for those flight attendants who are in level 3 requalification training. For example, if you're out for a significant amount of time and you kind of hit this threshold where you don't stay current and you have to go back to initial training, which is level 3 requalification, any train that's you participate in that is outside of the hours of 7 to 5, you will receive 1.5 times pay for those hours. An example would be currently during pool day and initial training, the day starts earlier in order for us to be able to get to the pool during a non, swim lesson time, things like that. So they actually start training at 6 in the morning. Because that 6 to 7 o'clock hour is before 7, a level 3 requal flight attendant would receive 1.5 time for that hour that they attended before 7, or the same thing would be on the back end after 5 o'clock. Recurrent training that exceeds contractual hours. We have an 8-hour contractual hour time for training, also between currently the hours of 7 to 5. If you are in training and for some reason training goes late on those hours, if you are anywhere from 1 to 15 minutes past your actual contractual hours, you as a flight attendant attending recurrent training will receive an additional 1 TFP for that. However, if the training does exceed 16 minutes or more on that day, you will be paid an additional 6 TFP on top of the recurrent training compensation that you currently receive. We also incorporated the training, recurrent training and early or grace month LOA into this contractual section. We incorporated CVT time testing review process MOUs. We clarified that checked flight attendants are the ones that will conduct OEs as well as do anything flight related for probationary flight attendants, and we incorporated the addendum. So section 31, the savings clause. We improved provisions to include negotiations on sections rendered invalid due to the operation of law. So our current CBA has to either meet or exceed basically federal laws. So a perfect example of this would be the duty, the minimum rest requirement. A couple of years back when the FAA reauthorization bill came in, which changed the minimum rest from 9 hours to 10, that did change rest applications that we had in the CBTs. What the savings clause does is it basically says that if something is invalidated because of a law, or that the entire contract is not invalidated, just the section, but we will then renegotiate on that section to address the change in the law.
Section 32, attendance policy. Effective if the TA is ratified, January 1st of 2025, the 3-point reduction system will go into effect in combination with the state sick leave bank, which provides further protections. Reserves will no longer check email. Instead, they will check the block-to-block messaging at the completion of the sequence in domicile. And if a reserve is assessed a no-show, but returns crew scheduling's call during the same wrap, there are two options for the reserve. They can be released until the next wrap with 1 day reduction in reserve guarantee, or they can return to the wrap or to the reserve assignment list with no reduction in guarantee.
All right, moving on to charters. So we have the ability to opt into email notifications of charter reposting and or awarding, ability to preference positions while bidding charters. So currently how charters work, if you are one of the lucky ones in the top seniority to actually get a charter off of a bid, you use your seniority at check-in time to determine who wants to be A or D or C or whoever. However, we've added the ability that you can actually bid for a position. Maybe you're only a B flyer, and if you're not awarded your B charter position, you absolutely do not want to work with this charter. So we've added that option so that you just don't have to you actually won't get the charter award unless your bid is honored. Reserves assigned to a charter may be displaced from a safety position by a more senior flight attendant at check-in. So if somebody, for whatever reason, a flight attendant who has a charter either is unable to perform because of a schedule disruption and or maybe a sick call, a reserve will be put onto that charter. However, because they didn't bid for it, we will use seniority to determine, they would fill into that vacancy of that position. However, you would use seniority at the time of check-in in that situation to have some flexibility to switch your safety position. We also have the ability to trade safety positions within the same charter. Currently, there is premium pay protection for canceled charter legs at 2 times. We reorganized this section and incorporated the addendum. All right, section 34, lodging and transportation, formerly known as hotels. We did add a lot of enhancements and changes to this provision. A lot of this is because of the Me Too clause that we have with the pilots. So we included provisions for a RON at domicile. So through a scheduling situation where maybe a leg gets canceled and you end up having to run at domicile, because of that, if it's a company modified thing, there's provisions for hotels in that situation. We also have a provision to avoid RONs at hotels during active labor disputes. We don't want our flight attendants to have to cross a picket line because we are an organized workforce as well. So we want to be in solidarity with our other unionized partners. So in situations like this, we can refuse to lay over at a hotel that has an active labor dispute, and that's something that the hotel committee actively monitors and coordinates with crew hotels and API to ensure that that doesn't happen. We incorporated gains from the new pilot contract. We updated our hotel minimum standard from a level 5 on the hotel, our travel weekly index, to a level 6, which is first class classification. We also added the gains in the pilot contract that involves room quality and selection process, long and short stay locations. The company has been keeping us together, but we have now contractualized a long stay and short stay hotel language that will guarantee that we'll have, downtown locations, for example, on long layers. But you can see that in the TA, all the provisions on that, such as food availability, safety, and transportation as well. We added a lot more enhancements to the definitions and what that means exactly. In terms of the hotel selection process, we actually added kind of a framework for how we go about sourcing or selecting hotels during unplanned hotel usage, ad hoc hotel lists, overflow, short notice, short-term, and emergency lodging. One thing that we will be adding is the ad hoc list to the in-flight website. This provides visibility for flight attendants to see where, if they're contracted hotel, let's say, for example, in San Diego, it's a San Diego Bayfront property here on the water. If there is fire alarm testing or there is maybe a burst water main or something that happens, we have to relocate crews. We will go to the ad hoc list, which is done in a preference of order, and the hotel committee is actively involved with ensuring that those properties have an order of preference and things like that, and that will be posted for all flight attendants to see as well. We outline when day rooms must be booked. So currently, if you have a ground time or a sit of 4 hours or longer, the company is required to provide a day room for you. However, at times that is a challenge whenever there are delays, and the delays are kind of rolling, or they're just being forecasted. And the flight attendant is entitled to a hotel, but crew scheduling is reluctant to book them. Or by the time that they book them, you get to the room, you have 30 minutes, you have to go back to the airport. So we're like, enough of this. We're just going to get this solved now. So anytime that a pairing is built that has ground time that meets the standard or minimum standard on this, the company is required to book that room so that it is made available. Anytime there's a delay or anything where the perceived ground time is expected to be that minimum, then the room has to be booked. So that way it's fully accessible by the flight attendant, and there's no wasted time in actually getting to that room and actually enjoying that time or being able to rest, etc. All right, hotel wait times. These you can kind of view these as basically pay penalties to compensate for your time. We've all been there before, where you show up at a hotel and the hotel room is not ready. Extremely frustrating. Normally, it's compounded if you've just got on a red-eye flight. So we've added a provision in here that for any wait that is 60 minutes or greater for your hotel room, you will start being compensated 0.75 TFP per hour, and that will be prorated. So if you wait for an hour and 15 minutes, you will receive 0.75 TFP for 1 hour and 15 minutes of your time. The 1 hour is the trigger, so it's anything past that. Now, in situations where the wait time becomes a little bit more extreme, the flight attendant basically has two options, and it's kind of up to you to decide what you want to do. If you are waiting at a property for 90 minutes or more, you can continue to wait and collect your compensation until your hotel room is available. However, if you want to basically take matters into your own hand and do what we call like a self-help and book your own hotel room, you're able to do so at that 90-minute mark and reimburse the room up to $400 from the company. Once again, the TA specifies exactly what the reporting requirements are, how that goes about. So just refer to that to get the specifics on that. The flight attendant in that situation, if you do choose to book your own room and reimburse, you still will be entitled to the 90 minutes that you did wait as actually straight compensation. So once again, we're giving the flight attendant the flexibility based upon what they prefer to do. Similar vein, talking about transportation wait times, there is a current provision right now that at 35 minutes from block-in, if you arrive to the curb and the transportation is not there, at 35 minutes, you are able to secure your own transportation to get to the hotel. What we've added a little bit more flexibility in this is you can do that, or you can choose to wait. If you call crew scheduling and say, hey, there was a traffic jam, the van will be there in 25 or 30 minutes. At that stage, you could just opt to wait for the transportations there. And once you hit an hour, you will now start being compensated at 0.75 TFP prorated. So basically, it's another one of these situations where whatever you prefer to do, you either take matters into your own hand or you collect compensation. It's kind of up to you. We updated the transportation requirements to more clearly specify the expectations in contracted or hotel transportation in terms of quality of vans, seatbelts, things like that. And then we updated the hotel committee participation and hotel selection process. That's more hotel committee specific language that discusses how we actually source hotels, site visits, things like that. Duration, as we touched upon in the beginning of this, we have the duration was a very strategic decision on how we decided to structure this. So if this deal is ratified, the TA is ratified, it will be a 3-year duration with a 1-year early opener, which once again, if JCBA does happen, it does give us those guaranteed pay raises for the next 3 years while we negotiate. So we're not kind of stuck in this stagnant period of time where there is no pay raises. However, if the merger does not go through and this is ratified, we will be back in negotiations in 2 years with the early opener. So it's kind of like that sweet spot. The new section I alluded to before in the past, where we out of the retirement section 29, we just took all the retiree pass stuff and jump seat specific things, and we moved them to different sections. So the new section is jump seat and pass privileges. Non-revenue boarding seniority will be based upon company policy. That will either be AS seniority, which it currently is, or AAG seniority as applicable. Basically, what this is doing is if the company down the road decides to change how they apply basically AAG time or your seniority here, that our contract will be compliant with whatever decision the company goes with. So it kind of takes away a contractual conflict that has existed in the past. We also have provisions which outlines the jump seat process. This is listing, priority, dress code, etc. One enhancement that it will be in this section is currently right now when you list on Fly, let's say, for example, as a commuter or just in general, you can't see, you only know the boarding code by the year and then basically by the priority code. However, 48 hours out, you are able to list for your intent to ride the jump seat, so that you'll be able to go in there and actually list as an intent to ride a jump seat, and or someone who's been able to view this will be able to view if someone has listed to with the intent to take the jump seat. So this is the pilots have this now, so we're incorporating that, which will allow us as flight attendants to kind of have a better idea of where people stand and what people's intentions are when they do this. And we also outline the provisions for pass privileges. The last section here is the commuter policy. So registered air commuters will have protections apply if standby list isn't processed up to the commuting flight attendant's boarding priority due to a company representative unable to process. I'm sure we all can infer what that means. If there are available seats, but due to no fault of your own, but another company representative is unable to get to that standby list and actually clear you for a seat, you are protected under this commuter policy in that situation. We've also added weight and balance to this, as well as aircraft downgrades. So if you were going to list for a flight and it was on a 9 max and then it changes to a 700 and you lost all that capacity, and because of that there were available seats and now there's not, you are protected with this 2 flight requirement, but these conditions would now qualify to assist you with that commuter protections. Registered air commuters will be required to provide other airline flight information to receive applicable commuter protections. This is incorporating that other airline language into here. Registered air commuter is protected if a commuting pilot is not removed to weight and balance, but the flight attendant is. So in the last ALPA contract, there was a clause that if you have a situation where you have a super junior commuting pilot and a super senior commuting flight attendant, in that situation, seniority rules. However, the pilots have a super seniority clause that if due to weight and balance issues that only that one person can ride the aircraft and that pilot is listed for the pilot jump seat, it is that pilot who will receive that seat and the more senior flight attendant will not. And that kind of edge case scenario, due to this situation, we have a specific clause that states that if the flight attendant is not able to board because of this reason, that they will be pay protected for that sequence or portion of the sequence missed, in addition to commuter policy recovery options. Might be late applies to registered air commuters. You can also email that you might be late. We defined a reasonable effort to arrive at scheduled check-in during severe weather, ground commuting operations, or SWEGCO. Ground commuting timeline is updated so that the flight attendant must call as soon as possible, but no later than 30 minutes prior to scheduled check-in. We incorporated the 28G commuter policy, as I mentioned earlier. We incorporated the other airline commuting LOA, which is about those other airlines. And then we incorporated ground commuting during a significant weather events LOA.
Okay, I'll run down the letters of agreement. Some were eliminated because they're no longer in force or relevant. The first one was withholding open time, a grievance award. It's no longer applicable, so it was removed. The Boeing purchase order letter of agreement is removed because all the planes have been delivered. The AAG letter, we just updated that with the applicable dates and numbers because basically it renewed. The job protection letter of agreement, again, just updated it with the applicable dates because going forward it will apply. The retiree health insurance, this is the ability to purchase health insurance using your available sick leave upon retirement. That LOA would have sunset with the current agreement, and we have renewed that. Sick family, sick child, we just maintained the provisions and updated the format. And LOA 6, the supplemental reduction in force protection, that was removed because the merger period has passed, and so that is no longer relevant. Virgin America red circled pay rates, that is still effective through October. So that letter of agreement remains. The commitment to negotiate hotel gain share program. We negotiated with this letter of agreement with management. It's a commitment to, if the TA is ratified, to negotiate a hotel gain share program with the company. And this basically is a proposed program in which, if the flight attendant doesn't need the hotel on a layover, say they're staying with family or have other plans, then they can basically sell the hotel back, and the cost savings is shared by the company and the flight attendant. It's arranged in advance and has certain protection or provisions associated with it. There are a few programs in the industry right now, and that's how they are written. Fatigue risk management plan, the FRMP, it's incorporated in an existing letter of agreement. The flight attendant instructor scope, this just ensures that regulatory training will only be taught by qualified flight attendant instructors for the duration of the contract. The flight attendant instructor handbook letter of agreement makes certain sections of the flight attendant instructor handbook contractual, so that they can only be changed through mutual agreement. Changes to paid sick leave laws. This is a provision for addressing future changes to paid sick leave laws and their impact on the collective bargaining agreement. It sets forth a process for negotiating and reaching final agreement, including arbitration, if the laws change again, and the sick leave programs need to be changed. The management. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Jeff.
No worries, that's all good. Management immersion program. This allows management, the management immersion program, to expand it in flight. It currently exists in most other labor groups. And how this would work is that management could perform limited duties on board as a peer, such as trash and recycling, pre-departure service, meal delivery, etc. Only service. They would remain under the direction of a flight attendant, so they don't get underfoot. They cannot occupy a flight attendant jump seat without an FAA certificate, just like today. They cannot perform safety duties at all. Flight attendants are protected from single source discipline. What this means is that if the supervisor, whoever manager person, sees something amiss, they can't report it on their own. There has to be multiple reports for them to be able to even to submit anything with regard to the incident. And that AFA may terminate the letter of agreement if there is a dispute over single source discipline that arises during the course of this program. Flight attendant recurrent training hours. We'll be expanding the training hours to improve flight attendant flexibility. Currently, the hours are 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and it would extend it by a couple hours on the backside to 7 p.m. So, for example, recurrent class could be scheduled from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So for those of you that don't like to get up super early, this might be something that you would like to see. The 8-hour daily maximum still applies. The pay will remain the same. This would begin with RQ 2025 if the TA is ratified. A minimum of 50% of recurrent training in each domicile would remain the same as it is between the standard hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then either party can suspend the letter of agreement with 2 bid months of notice. Moving vacation days while on LOA and PPP eligibility, this affects very few flight attendants. But if you're moving your vacation days while on a leave of absence, this would update the existing letter of agreement with changes to longevity PTO, because we eliminated that. And then the PPP structure has also changed. Flight attendant jump seat occupancy. There were discussions during the course of these negotiations about having other work groups occupy our jump seats, who shall remain nameless. This will outline who may occupy a flight attendant jump seat for the duration of the collective bargaining agreement. It would be qualified Alaska flight attendants, just like today. Authorized Alaska Airlines in-flight management personnel who are also qualified flight attendants, like today. OB students and flight attendants in requalification status accompanied by a check flight attendant. This doesn't happen very often, but you will see those out there here and there. Qualified Horizon flight attendants traveling for pleasure, just how we can travel on their jump seats for pleasure. Authorized Horizon in-flight supervisory employees who are also qualified flight attendants holding the certificate, traveling for pleasure. They can do that now. And this last bullet is in case we add a true reciprocal jump seat agreement amongst carriers so that this could be folded in, which is qualified other airline flight attendants in the event the company and the FAA authorize a reciprocal jump seat agreement. Onboard flight attendant breaks or flight attendant onboard breaks would be provisions for flights to take onboard breaks in flight. That LOA has been in effect for a while. It's now just been folded into the contract. Okay, legacy retiree pass privileges. This maintains the current retiree privileges for anyone hired prior to and who retires prior to ratification date of the subsequent contract. The age, vesting year requirements, number of passes, etc. are maintained, at least as favorable as the pilot retirees. Any enhancements to company retiree pass policy will be incorporated. This would apply for the life of the agreement. Market rate adjustment negotiation. The parties agree to negotiate market rate adjustment language in good faith during JCBA negotiations if the merger is approved. And if the merger doesn't close, the company agrees to negotiate in good faith a market rate adjustment within 1 year of the merger fail date. All right, so additional resources available on the contract website. We have the tentative agreement text, the tentative agreement summary booklet, the comprehensive summary. There's also explanations of the following provisions: boarding pay, retro pay, insurance premiums, stepping through the pay scale, sick leave and attendance, FAQs and compilation of roadshow questions, roadshow information, voting information, and an industry comparison. So before we get into the very last part, so I'm going to add back up. I think we have a couple corrections we'd like to make for the record. So looks like we wanted to go back and talk about reassignments briefly. There was one example that was slightly incorrect, so we'd like to go back and at least talk about that. Thank you. Kiki, take it away.
Thank you. So the reassignment is on a day-for-day example. So at the beginning of the presentation, we said that you would be paid the difference of the total TFP value of the trip. And that is true, but on a day-for-day basis. So in this particular example, day 1 is worth 7.2 TFP. And so that day has to equal 7.2 TFP. So that calculation would be 1.0 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown, 3 TFP at 1.5 times for the DPM, and then 3.2 TFP at 1.5 times for the premium guarantee, the flights not made up in the sequence on that day. And it'll be for each day. So if you had one day where, let's say, you only had minimal flying, like one leg to Portland, and then another day where you had the milk run, it wouldn't be the aggregate of the whole sequence. It would be the value of every single day compared to what you flew and what you were scheduled to fly. So that is just a small correction. It ended up being worth more TFP in the end versus the trip end aggregate, which is not how reassignment is done. It's done on a day-for-day basis.
Thank you. All right. So let's go ahead and flash back to the end then. So thank you for bearing with us. Appreciate it. We are now at the end of our presentation, our formal presentation. We're now going to open this up to Q&A.